All right, so tell me about Columbus and the natives and his arrival to the Americas.
When Columbus arrived in the Caribbean and he first encountered the natives, he discovered that they were routinely under violent attack by their native neighbors who would attack them, kidnap them, enslave them. Yeah.
So, when did the enslaving of natives begin?
Shortly after, like his second voyage, the whole notion and architecture of slavery in this hemisphere was an extension of the slavery system happening at that time in Spain among fellow Spanish people, called encomiendas. That's what they were called. We would consider it something like a plantation, so to speak, today, in that it was a working, functioning mini society or culture, like a farm, a factory type of thing. And that was because of Muslim occupation of Spain at the time, like 2 years before Spain sent Columbus here. The monarchs Isabella and her husband Fernando had consolidated native Christian Spanish autonomy away from the Muslim occupier of Spain. The Muslims had conquered Spain, half of Spain. And the Spanish instituted this system at home, which was severe indentured servitude, slavery, and they consciously replicated that in the Western Hemisphere with the natives. which gets the ball rolling, I guess, on just the cycle of human depravity. So that the Spanish in the 1400s, right, they already have this slavery at home of essentially Spanish Muslims, or the Muslims who remained in Spain, who were only there because the Muslims felt the need to conquer Spain. It comes sort of full circle when you figure that by the early 1800s now, we're living with the sin of slavery and racism in America. And you now have in Africa 1 million white European slaves enslaved by the Muslims. So you see,
Now,
bigotry begets bigotry begets bigotry.
now, when you say the Muslims, where are
Not
these?
all the Muslims, just like
Yeah,
all the Christians aren't persecuted.
exactly. So I'm asking,
they were
where?
Muslims.
I know, but
Just
from
like
where?
Christians were enslaving people.
From where? From a particular country? From a
It was a
particular?
caliphate, which is, for lack of a better word, you're talking about imperial theocracy, which was Muslim, that started out from what today is Istanbul in Turkey. Now, the Muslim the Muslim Turks conquered Istanbul from the Christian Romans. Okay, but that was centuries before. They branch out to what today is basically most of the known Muslim world. So by the time it gets to northern Africa, Spain is just a hop away. Sicily, under all of this, was an Arab united United Emirates, yeah, Muslim emirate for centuries. And so this was the circumstances under which, by the late 1400s, the Spanish, who were native Christian, wrestled their autonomy away from the Muslim imperialist theocratic occupiers, which begat the Spanish decision to implement that slavery in the States, which was then repeated by the Muslims in North Africa come the 17 1800s. You know, theocracy, bigotry, all these things beget more atrocities.
Okay, now Hawaii.
King Kamehameha is considered the unifier of what today we know of as Hawaii, the Hawaiian Islands. He was the conqueror of the Hawaiian Islands. Guy comes from Big Island with his arms and his army and his ships, not with a treaty, and he conquers the people of those islands. And today, because he looks like the people from which he came and then conquered, he's called a unifier. The islands we call today, we know of as the Philippines, like in Native America, like in Europe long before that, they were tribes of indigenous people, like everyone in humanity, that at sometimes were living in peace, sometimes were at war with each other, until the Spanish come and tear up the place and conquer the place and unify these people into what we now consider the Philippines. But the Spanish weren't necessarily doing anything that was different than historical human atrocities. They just were more powerful. The native peoples of the Americas, same thing. Particularly, I think the Apaches, their sustenance, part of their sustenance, self-sustaining ability, was warring with other Native Americans. And not like, I'm gonna meet you at noon tomorrow and we're gonna conquer you, but violent sabotage and attacks on other Native American peoples. The Aztecs, pre-Columbian, the Aztec people, the Aztecs they essentially colonized in place. They would venture out and purposefully, yet unnecessarily, war with other indigenous peoples of the Mexica peoples, which I believe is a pre-Columbian term, and then assimilate them into Aztec society. And that is what the Spanish conquistadors encountered when they got here. It's human violence begetting more human violence for different reasons. And what's going on right now, what's been going on for the past centuries, is this hemisphere's inability to own it, for all individual groups to own it and to do something about it, and which is what we need to do, which is what's coming to a head
Now, where does the term Latin American come from?
The notion of pan-Latinism came from late medieval and Renaissance Italy. The poet Dante, the playwright and political theorist Niccolò de Machiavelli were living in an Italy that was largely occupied by foreign forces, most notably the Spanish and some others. And they wanted to promote the notion of collecting all the Italians of the peninsula who were collectively an indigenously Latin people, or as we would say in Italian, una gente latina, for their own freedom. And that was renewed by Mussolini much later, even though he perverted that notion to encapsulate imperialism. And so by the time you have the New World established, I think 1800s, the French, who themselves are a Latin people, their culture, their language, much of it comes from the Latin influence. That's why French is a Latin language as well. To differentiate Latin Europeans from what now, by the 1800s, were a collective people of Latins in America. And so that's where I think the term Latin American comes from, which Napoleon III, Emperor of France, I believe supported. So in the movie Sorry to Bother You, the writer-director, who's black, Boots Riley, has, I think, a black guy ask, since how long have Italians been white? And I think someone says, for about 60 years, which is a play on the true fact that this entire hemisphere is full of all of its people, obsessed with boxes and labels. And Italians look white, right? White, black, all this stuff is a color that is not as indicative of your culture and your history and where you come from, as we think, checking a box. So it's not necessarily, if Italians are white, you think they're white. I have relatives that are darker than Colin Powell. It's not really as important. But the term, what has been lost, is the notion that we're Latin. If you look at the literature, popular literature, the Murder on the Orient Express, in the book, which came out in the 30s, it wasn't the Spanish person in the movie that everyone suspected as the murderer. It was the Italian. There was no Spanish guy in the movie. It was the Italian, and everyone, whether it's this strong, overt racism, or if it's just the Italian guy is walking by, everyone just sort of has an eye on the Italian guy. And that was that proliferated throughout popular Anglo-normative culture, whether it was movies or cinema. And even in the Orient Express, when they actually go to Italy, and they say that the guy was acting Latin in the extreme, meaning that he had a pulse, that he was passionate. And so the term Latino, that came about as a classification, I think, in the census of the year 2000, or as other people call it, the year 2000. And there were activists within the Hispanic community who had a problem with that, just as some of them had a problem with the designation of being called Hispanic to begin with, because that only gives deference to your Spanish imperialist ancestors, not the Africans that they brought over, not the indigenous people that they almost eradicated, which those activists at the time, and we're talking the turn of the 21st century,
Yeah.
knew we're getting short shrift by the purely Spanish and Latin designation. You know, everyone in Italy knows their Latin history. I assume everyone in Senegal knows who they are. That everyone in Japan knows who they are. The Germans don't need the man to suggest that they are a Teutonic people. They know that they're of the ancient Teutonic tribe that tried to fuck up Italy's shit in ancient Rome. But in this hemisphere, which is the most, maybe the most diverse, you know, a people who are a wonderful amalgam of a ton of native peoples here. And black folks from Africa who themselves aren't all alike. And Spanish Europeans. Were down for the box in the census, even though it was their own community activists that had, I don't know, the knowledge, the wisdom to say that this box does not represent the totality of who we are. But everyone in this hemisphere, you know, I'm sure everything I'm saying about Italian history is news to most Italian Americans, but it's not to the Italians in Italy. So this whole hemisphere is locked into boxes of their own choosing, instead of using as a crutch the desire to fill in the picture. Let's fill out this landscape with more knowledge, more understanding of where each of us comes from. But all of us are happy with that box. The man in the 2000 census says, we're now giving you the opportunity to call yourselves Latino. We're going to go with that. You know? You want to talk about Pan-Latinism really beginning was with La Lega Latina, which was created by the ancient Romans as a conglomerate. We're talking centuries BC. A conglomerate, a corporation, an incorporation of all the indigenously Latin peoples of the southern Italian peninsula. Sort of like a NATO of its time against the invaders that came north of northern Italians. I'm sorry on my people in Milan and Venice and everyone. Let alone the other Europeans above Italy who had an obsession with conquering it. So you had these Latin people as a conglomerate brought together in ancient Rome called the Latin League, La Lega Latina. And that was the first notion of Pan-Latinism. And we're talking 2,500 years ago. I'm pessimistic.
But what?
Because it's bad enough that you have, that we still have to fight racism, that we still have to fight inequity in so many things, whether it's economic, whether it's ethnic. You're dealing with people that are unteachable, people on both sides that don't know how to vote in their own best interests. But even with good people, of which there may be more of than bad people, you have 100 people, 40 people can fuck up all your shit, but 60 are good. But even if you're good, the truth cannot compete with your phone or the tendencies of people's behavior in what is a society that ultimately leaves you free to do the right thing or not to, regarding everything, regarding consumerism, regarding racial relations, regarding law enforcement, regarding the consumption of your daily life, whether it's the information you have the curiosity to discover or the things you consume. You know, I have an issue with bugging out in Do the Right Thing, in that his main beef starts with his Jordans getting dirtied. And that's a funny moment in the movie, but you're talking about an overpriced consumer product that he attaches a sacredness to because of its marketing value tied to a celebrity. And that's happening, if you notice, while they're giving a hard time to the white guy, as if he doesn't belong in the neighborhood. Well, you know, I don't remember there being a tribe of Bed-Stuy in Wakanda. The Native Americans belong there, right? Now, true, there are people that had no choice to be there, and there are people that did. But I don't see anybody instigating a community outreach, an activist awareness to extend themselves to Native peoples, to first see where they stand, to see, would you be up for leaving the reservation? Literally, we have reservations still in central New York State. If we could, in this community, I don't know, provide some type of welcome back, a rehabilitation, if you so choose, some type of outreach. But he's upset with the guy inadvertently dirtying up his uber consumerist, uber capitalistic product. You know, whether you're an ultra left-wing woke white person, or whether you're an alleged activist of color, rioting or looting and saying down with capitalism, down with, you know, it's a business is not as important as a life, which is true. Are you suggesting that none of you are representative of the millions of views that a celebrity who is utterly consumed with money puts online? Are you not one of the white people taking a photo of your $8 coffee filled with chemicals that will kill you, but the branding is so great, and so now you feel copacetic with the world? Are you not one of the dudes of every color and tax bracket shopping for the 50th edition of kicks you already have, which is what everyone was doing before they decided to burn it all down now in the name of justice? And justice and knowledge and activism simply can't compete with our freedom to either be happy with what we have, indulge a little, or engage in this uber consumption. Even if you're just watching that video that the celebrity puts up on Instagram about how it's all about the money, it's all about the money. Jordan actually had to go out there and average 28.2 points a game. Then the next year 22.7, even though he only played 12 minutes a quarter or half. Then 37.1. he actually had to go out there and do something. And all of us feel copacetic because we're wearing a shoe that has his name stitched on it, probably by a guy making $1 an hour someplace else. Whether it's that or whether it's your sense of an initiative to do something, there are things that you can stake claim in every day to read. You know, maybe you don't have to watch that uber capitalistic video for the 50th time, or maybe you can be a fan of the sport and have the edition of the kicks that came out last year, and you're okay with that, and maybe take the extra time to, I don't know, read books or watch Meet the Press or engage with your community or protest your legislator or run for office yourself. You know, what do they call her now? AOC? Everyone's going by KFC initials. This is a person who was a regular citizen that chose to engage the process that we all have readily available to us. And even though she hasn't really accomplished much by way of actual legislation, she's essentially using it as a stage on which to exercise the same right we all have, which is free speech. You know? But Martin Luther King and Bobby Kennedy today simply would not be able to compete with your phone. And the literally 75th meme you watch today, whether it's about your cat or our adorable dog or something worthwhile, but you're not going to get properly informed as by a meme, you know? And that's the hope is that you would, in a world in which the poor have more information immediately accessible to them than kings did, that you would be a curious enough person to be a student and not just an ultra consumer, and then justify the burning down of the house that's built with your dollars and your attention, when all the unfilmed George Floyds were suffering injustice, the people condoning the burning down of their own community, by the way, were giving their time, attention, and dollars to those businesses. You know, maybe they should have destroyed the cop car. That community paid for the cop car. They didn't pay for Radio Raheem to be killed. But they probably would have been better, instead of destroying Sal's, to have regular community meetings at Sal's. A child himself of immigration, who, even in the movie, said he was proud to nourish that community, which was not of people like him, with his people's food, and leave Pino isolated in the prison of his own hate.